right, put your thinking caps on because we're going to take a deep dive into this book, Big Gods. This is written by Ara Norenzayan, and the subtitle is How Religion Transformed Cooperation and Conflict. So, a very exciting book. My formal education in history, philosophy, history of religion, anthropology, I dabbled in those things in my undergrad years, and that came to an end in 2012. Well, this book came out in 2013. So this is a lesson that when your education, formal education ends, you can also continue it on your own accord. So I'm so glad that I've got a chance to read this book and share some of this stuff with you. Very exciting stuff. All right, so right away, I want to tell you about this gentleman. He's a really interesting scholar. He's very thorough. He's, from what I understand, he's Lebanese. He was raised Armenian Orthodox, which is like an old Christian denomination, from what I understand. And then he was raised at a time when still where there's conflict between two conflicting religious faiths. One believes in one God, another one believes in another God. They live close together, and the religion is used to like console the people that are grieving from the war, but then the religion is also used to motivate the conflict. So it like there's both of these forces going on, and it perpetuates. So he's asking the question like, what's going on here? Because if we zoom out, there's actually a lot of gods that humans have believed in, but only recently have they believed in certain gods like Yahweh and Allah and, Jesus Christ, for example. Those are newer, So the analogy I like to think of is like, imagine you go to an old pine forest where there's nothing but pine trees, but they're big and beautiful, and you look up and you're like, wow, look at these beautiful pines. And they're so old, they're older than you, so it's hard to fathom that there was a time in that forest where other trees might have flourished, but it's most likely that they did. And so this is the same with religion. We grow up, often many of us, in a monoculture of religion where almost everyone in our circle believes the same things. And this is like a pine forest. It's very old, it's very beautiful, and there's something nice about them all looking the same. Something beautiful about that. But that's not all forests, and that's not how that forest has always been, and it's not how that forest will always be. All right, so that's what Big Gods is saying, is that big gods are not all gods. They're a specific subtype of gods that have been culturally successful. So instead, you can think of, instead of people converting to different gods, these are gods that have convinced human minds that they're more worshipable, or there's more benefits to associating with people that worship that God than there might be to other gods. And so we're going to talk about a few of those things. So he talks right away. I love about this book is he goes right into the 8 principles of big gods, and they're very short. I could read them to you, but I want you to read this book. And the 8 principles of big gods, he says right there, and the chapters all reflect that. We're going to just talk about a few of them, though. All right, so first off, from my notes, there's been 18,000 different gods that we know of anthropologically. So they've dug up different, idols, and there's names of gods in the historical records and things. And somebody took the time to catalog these things. And right now, as of latest count, there's like 18,000. But most people don't believe in those gods. Most people believe in only one God. And like probably people that believe in that one God too. And maybe you're somebody who believes in one God only and not the others. So why is that? Why is it that nobody around believes in those gods anymore, but people mostly believe in these one gods, these big gods? So monotheism is currently the most successful idea in human history. All right, because it's currently occupying 60 to 85% of the world population, which is 5 to 7 billion people. So that's why he's got this nice cover. That's why I'm wearing these funky pants to match. It's a big, cool idea. Big gods. And in some ways it's very beautiful. In some ways it can be dangerous. So, yeah, 5 to 7 billion people. You probably know some people. You might be one. All right. But it hasn't always been this way, like I said. Some of those gods that have no longer worshipped are like Zeus, Odin, Ra, Marduk. There's also some goddesses out there. Some are, some might be, big, stronger gods in the pantheon. But some gods come from pantheons where there's many gods. So, but for some reason, these Allah and Yahweh, those two gods, were very successful in the last, few hundred to a few thousand years. All right, so let's talk about why. So when you have tribes living out before, so 12,000 years ago, they say is the Neolithic Revolution. This is when people nomadic were hunter-gatherers, were nomadic. Tribes are 50 to 150. You know everybody knows you. This is the standard for human evolution, or human culture for thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. And we still see it in primates today. If you go and visit chimps and things in the wild, these are the groups that they live in. They know everybody knows them. But then when we finally get into the Neolithic Revolution, where we're planting the crops and we're staying near the crops and building our homes and starting to colonize around where the plants are going to grow, that's when the populations grow too big for people to know everybody. So religion steps in and says, hey, let's get a chance for everybody to get to know one another through, everybody can worship the same God, and the gods that people believe can see. God is the original flock camera, I like to say. God can see your actions even when no one's around. God can also see your thoughts. Even the biggest gods can see your thoughts and your intentions even. So these gods know what's going on inside of you. And so that watch people are nice people. That's the first principle of big gods, is that, and this is proven through psychology, through occupational management, where they've actually done studies where like people will be working on their job or whatever, and they'll just have people in lab coats standing there, and they'll turn the lights on or brighter or less bright, and it doesn't matter if they make the lights brighter or less bright. People actually produce more and they do better at their work, because watch people, because they're being watched. It's not because of anything but the lights. So anyways, that's just a principle. You probably know this already. And then, so gods that can watch you, they help you to behave and cooperate better than you might otherwise. And so, but in modern times, we have governments with, the police, the courts, social safety nets in some ways, recourse, accountability, where people don't have to believe that other people are being, godly and thinking that they're being watched, because they are being watched by the greater societal police or whatever, cultural judges. So this is relatively new. This is the last 200 years that we've seen institutions become strong enough to start to supplant religious monopoly in that area. All right, let me get back to my notes. I could go on and on. Okay, so the cultural benefits, this is important. All right, so why is it beneficial? Trade. So if you're traveling from one place to another, or you're a merchant in a market, you're going to trust that person more if they're your same religion. The Muslim Ottoman Empire, it is so vast, mostly because of this. Defense. People of the following of your fellow faith is going to come to your defense more so than, you know, somebody of a different faith. So there's this sense of camaraderie amongst faith. So there's more trust, cooperation, there's more moral consideration. I like to say moral priming. 5 times a day, Muslims are reminded of their commitment to God, so that reminds them to act more moral. And then for Christians, they're reminded to pray and read scripture daily, and then they go to church, weekly. So those are all what we call moral priming for people to, have a thought that they wouldn't otherwise have, that hopefully gets them to act in a way that's better than they otherwise would act. All right. And then there's also community infrastructure. So no one person can build like a big brick church, probably, but if they pool their money, they can, and now all of a sudden generations have access to the grounds and the parking and the big sanctuary where everybody can do the rituals together and watch everybody do the rituals, which is key. We'll get to that. There's mutual vilification, there's resistance to outsiders, and then people cooperate to compete. So basically within the monoculture of religion, so within Christianity you have a monoculture, they're all cooperating more or less, and then you have within Islam, they're all cooperating more or less, but every time they clash, there's more, they go back to the drawing board, so to speak, and they cooperate even more, so the clashes can be more interesting or tragic, however you might want to put it. Okay, let's keep going. All right, the psychological benefit. Let's talk about that one. There's a psychological benefit of big gods because that provides answers to life's hardest questions. So when you're contemplating the death of a loved one, tragedy in your area, your own death, religion offers ready-made, comforting answers to that, saying, hey, they're going to be in a better place, you're going to be in a better place, everything's under control, everything happens for a reason, don't worry. Those answers are comforting. And so religion offers confident guidance in domains where experience and evidence, expertise, are hardest to obtain. So no one really knows where your aunt went when she died, unfortunately. But religions will, various religions will claim to know, and they'll say, oh, it's this or that. No one really knows. So but religion comes in confidently and has answers for that, which is very interesting, because confidence reduces anxiety and uncertainty, and it shortens the time of decision making around greater concerns. So basically it allows for consensus faster, because confidence moves folks to action. That's why the cooperate to compete motivation is present, because a confident person can come in and say they have an answer, and people will move towards that because they're all there. Okay, let's keep going. I'm almost done. I think this is very close to being done. All right, here we go. Yes. All right, let's talk about implicit theism first. I'm just going to briefly touch on this because it's very interesting. You'll have to learn about this more on your own. But basically, there's humans have this tendency to be theistic, to believe in gods in general. It's like a natural tendency because of 3 principles. One is we have a mentalization of minds separate from bodies. So we have this idea of like, there could be something, a part of us that would survive death and live on somewhere else. So we have this concept of a soul, and various religions have these ideas in various forms. This number 2, there's this idea of psychological immortality. There's a feeling a part of us will survive death, and we want that to be true. So there's this kind of like, we're primed to, not want to go into, nothingness or oblivion, so please tell me otherwise. And then the third one is we exist in a world of objects. So, like, for example, here's my fire detector because I was browning the chicken the other day. Um, these are sticky tabs. These are purposeful for sticking your art on the wall. So we live in a world of objects. This is a pen for writing. So everything, this is a modern phenomena. Humans have not always lived around lots of objects for purpose, but because we live around these objects for purposes, we say, oh, these were all made by humans. These were all made by somebody for a reason. And so we use that to extrapolate. It's easy to extrapolate, I should say, that, oh, well, maybe, this universe was made for a reason. Maybe I was made for a reason. And then the natural follow-up to that is there was a creator who made us with a purpose. And so those are the three principles of our theistic inclinations. So mind and body, the psychological need to survive death, and then also the purpose. They call it teleological theology. The reason we want to have a purpose with our life, and to think that we're just here, to do whatever is not satisfying. All right. So here's the cool idea: is religion doesn't happen through ideas. People don't believe and say, "Oh, I've evaluated all the gods and all their principles, and I've come to the belief that this is the one I choose." Almost no one does that. Now there are seekers that go to various religions. Maybe they piecemeal ideas together, but almost no one is, doing a full analysis and then saying, "Okay, this is the one I think is true." And I'm going to now go wholehearted into this. Almost everyone comes to believe in their God because they're raised in areas where other people believe in those gods already. And so they're taught to believe in these gods. So your caregivers or influential people in your community, what they do is on a routine basis, they sincerely go through the rituals. So that's key. So it's routine. It's not just once every blue moon. It's often they go through the rituals. They do the things whatever the religion calls for: the singing, the dancing, the wearing the clothes, the chanting, the reading the scriptures, the praying, the crying, the chant, whatever the ritual is. It could be any ritual, but it has to be done sincerely too. People can pick up if it's not being done sincerely. So as long as it meets those criteria, then kids or people nearby, not just kids, but kids especially, pick up on that, and then they're likely to follow suit. But in areas where those things don't happen, where it's not routine, where the rituals, aren't done by everyone, and they're maybe not done sincerely, if people don't have access to seeing people, the reason why you don't worship Thor is you've never seen somebody repeatedly, sincerely do the rituals that are to Thor. That's why. So Thor's dead. Thor no longer colonizes human minds in that respect. But if you do believe in a big God, you have seen repeatedly influential people sincerely do the rituals, and that's the only reason why people believe. They don't. When they hear arguments against their faith, it doesn't matter. They're like, I see these people that I know and love. They do the rituals, and they did it last week, and they're going to do it again next week. So I'm sorry, I believe them. And what can you say to that? Maybe. All right. So the next thing is atheism. So there's 3 or 4 kinds of atheism. There's not just one kind of atheist out there. So I love this. The first kind of atheism, I gotta be careful here, is where people don't understand that mind and body separation thing as much, or they don't, they're not as, I need to look into this one more before I can, but he calls it mind-blind atheism, and it tends toward the autistic spectrum. So the traditional bell curve, on one end is people that tend to be autistic, and there also is a correlation with them being atheist. They don't believe in God because maybe they're not able to interpret the rituals or see the link as easily between the rituals and the God. They don't get it as much. I don't know. I said, I gotta tread lightly, I gotta learn more. Let's go to the next one. Analytic atheism. That's the one I am. This is somebody who has, thought through some of the arguments, and it's not. There is that intuitive theism, like I said, but then you can be trained. You have an inclination towards analytic thinking, and then you have to be trained in analytical thinking, and then and only then is it possible for you to become an analytic atheist in some ways. And then the next one, I'll let you decide if it's 3 or 4. There's the incredulous atheist and the atheist. The incredulous atheist is somebody who doesn't see the rituals. Like, if you've never seen the rituals of Thor, then you're an atheist of Thor. So you're you're an incredulous atheist of Thor. We're all probably incredulous atheists of Thor. And then atheist is somebody who just doesn't really care about religion so much. They're apathetic to it. Yes, they weren't raised in it, but they're not. I don't know. It could be the same. Incredulous and atheism might be similar and overlapping. I'm sure there's overlap in all of this to some degree. But just know there's not one kind of atheist out there. There's multiple. You may know one of sorts. And that's where I think, let's make sure I've said everything I want to say. All right. Yeah. So, let's just go back to this book. I highly recommend this book. This book taught me so much about humanity, myself, and not just the people nearest me, but also people around the world. It's an interesting perspective. Cultural evolution. It's the cultural model of religion, and I think it's an interesting perspective, and it's taught me a lot. So, best of luck to you in your reading.